Capita envisions a future in which children and families can flourish. By prioritizing our youngest children, their families, and their communities, we have the potential to radically transform the fabric of our societies for the long term. In this series of Capita in Conversation, we talk to interviewees from around the world to hear their stories, knowledge, wisdom, and ideas on how to create child and family flourishing. In this episode, Capita Chief Strategy Officer Caroline Cassidy interviews LaDon Love, Executive Director of Spaces in Action, to talk about communities, the power of storytelling and listening, and how we build trust.
For this Capita in Conversation, I'm really excited to talk to LaDon Love, Executive Director of Spaces in Action, an interdisciplinary social and economic justice organization working with Black, Brown, and immigrant communities in the Washington, D.C. area of the United States. Spaces in Action is focused on using people-centered narratives to elevate the voices of individuals and communities to advocate for their needs and goals. This includes creating a space where real listening happens, where there is not a rush to get through an agenda or to make a decision, and where the goal is to converse, not convince. LaDon and I first met last year at a Capita event where we ended up chatting about the power of communications and the role of deep listening in creating change, all topics close to my heart. Today I want to talk more to LaDon about this and about how we can create a culture of solidarity and care in and through our communities. How do we get better at creating community to help build a social fabric that can support our youngest children, their families, and caregivers? LaDon, welcome.
Thank you for having me here today.
Great to have you. So I'm going to kick off with a question specifically looking at kind of the idea of community. As we know in recent years, particularly since the pandemic, there is a growing realization that we need to work more in our communities, probably more than ever before. In your view, why is community so important, and what do you think constitutes a strong community?
Right. In my view, I believe that community is important because it is a space where we connect with others. It is a space where we hope to have affirmation, and it is a space where we can learn about each other and see our connections with each other. Sometimes we think that we're very, very different, but when we start to share our stories, we realize the similarities, and we get to have more respect and appreciation for the differences, because our communities are made up of many different people. And the more our folks can connect with each other, the more we can care for each other. And I believe that creates hope, it creates love, it creates resilience.
And in your work with Spaces in Action, you talk specifically about communities of hope, healing, opportunity, and possibility for everyone. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Yes. So as an individual, I am very optimistic. I believe that if we can envision the change that we want to see, if we can envision the world in which we want to live in, we could start making some strides to move in that direction. So I always have hope. And I find that sometimes when you feel at your lowest low, when you feel beaten down, when you feel isolated, you may have less hope. And this is a reason why we need to create space for people. I'm going to take it back to that word community, to build community together so that we know that we're not alone. We know that everything that we're doing is bigger than just us, and that there are other people who may be going through the same challenge, but there are other people who also have the same ambition, the same dream, the same goal of improving their situation. And so that's why we center the story, so that people can talk about what it is they're experiencing, but most importantly, what their vision is for what they want to see in a world, what they want to see for their families, what they want to see for themselves. And all of that helps to sprout the flower that I like to call hope.
Fantastic. In sort of nowadays, I think that there's a very interesting kind of, trust or distrust is such a fundamental issue in our societies, right? What do you think is driving these plummeting levels of trust, particularly trust in government and institutions. And I think kind of how is that affecting communities as such?
I think one factor is when there's broken promises and when there are dreams that are deferred. So we have people who run for office and they give a lot of promises. We have folks who get into office and then they forget about the people who put them in office. And this is on the Democratic, Republican, and any side, because there's a whole lot of people who are in office that are spineless when it comes to making sure that communities are taken care of, that low-income communities are taken care of, that Black, brown, and immigrant communities are taken care of. And they wouldn't be in those offices if folks were not voting. So I think we need to do more work on accountability once people are in office. And we need to build a stronger sense of determination and a demand from the community to hold them accountable. We just had a child tax credit here in America last year, and it wasn't extended because some spineless elected officials decided that it was not in their interest to make sure that families had about $300 or more a month to help them make ends meet. So again, we see where elected officials who have the best health insurance, who have a viable and living wage, who have supports to make sure that they have housing, are not making sure that everyone who lives in America has access to the same thing. So why should someone trust someone who time and time again shows them exactly who they are?
What will it take really to rebuild trust, particularly in communities of color?
Well, when we think about the building of the trust, I think, one, we need to start at home, right? So how are we building our own base of people who have deep relationships and deep connections with each other? For us, it starts with listening, active listening, which you talked about earlier as deep listening, where you're listening for understanding and you're asking questions for clarity, but you're not thinking of what response you want to give to a person. And then affirm the person for what they shared with you. Because when someone takes the time to share who they are, it's important that we also give them recognition for us hearing their story. And in our practice, we tend to retell pieces of the story that connect with us so that, one, the person knows that they were listened to and not just heard, and you get to connect how their story is touching you in a personal way. So that's one way of building those interpersonal connections through storytelling. But then you do it on a broader scale because you want folks doing one-to-ones, conversations or relational meetings with others and doing that same process so that they're making connections. And then we bring them to a community action, a community meeting, so that folks can do some development and joining together to make deeper connections, but also connecting it to a broader goal. And that group would then decide what are the issues that are impacting them, and then create community-centered solutions that may turn to be a policy solution. It may be an action solution. It may be a relational solution. But most importantly, it is community-centered because the community is developing what that solution is. Then that is what we take to talk to maybe an elected body or an agency or another configuration that is going to get the community what it needs. But there also has to be that accountability of the folks who are in office to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do.
How do you think the efforts to rebuild trust and connection in families and communities can align with efforts to promote like parent-child connection as the basis for lifelong flourishing, as we like to talk about it at Capita?
Yes. So we have several programs or activities that we do. So one, our storytelling. We teach people how to tell their story so that they are connecting their values and who they are to a big problem that they're facing. But the power is in them saying what the solution should be and the action steps that need to be taken in order to move towards that big, bold solution. And there's always these epiphanies and aha moments that people have. One, they realize they have a story. And two, they realize that they are the ones that we've been waiting for, because their solution is something that will not just help them, but help the broader community. And Then we also do a process called parent cafes. We learned this technique through Be Strong Families. And this is a guided conversation that is based on 5 protective factors that allows a person to connect with each other. And there's a question based on that protective factor that is asked. And then there's small group conversations where people get to bring their lived experience. And sometimes people bring in things that they're going through right now that they're grappling with, but they get to work in a small group and have a conversation and come up with some answers together. And then we always have resources available too, because there's a theme that's associated with the conversation. And we'll find resources, resource people or resource readings, agencies and things of that nature that we can share with the folks who go through this conversation, so that we don't just leave them there, but we also connect them to other resources they may need, but then they also make a connection with each other. A lot of times, new friendships are developed through these conversations of sharing their story through our storytelling session, and then also through the parent cafe. And then in addition to that, we hold different meetings. And after the meetings, our staff follow up with the individuals who attend. And we ask, what did you like about the process? What do you wish were different? What questions does it leave you wondering? And that helps us do several things. One, it helps us to understand what the person went through. We get to learn their self-interest, and we get to figure out how we can become better, because our motto is practice, 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 get better and practice some more, because it's not about perfection. It's about growing. And when we do this with our members and our staff together, we all get to improve our knowledge and improve our skills and build our confidence. And then we also follow up with the folks who said they were coming to the meeting that don't show up. Why is that important? It is important because we get to connect with the person and let them know that they were missed. There's so many times that we do things or go places, and when we're not there, no one lets us know that we were missed. No one lets us know that our absence was felt. And we need to know, we need our members to know that when they are not there, we notice it. We want to know that they're okay. So that's like a wellness checkup. And then we also get to debrief them on the meeting. And then we ask them to come to the next meeting. And most times this leads to folks saying, I'm definitely going to make it next time, and I'm bringing someone. We also have this model of when you learn something, you are responsible for teaching at least 5 other people. That's how we're going to create this ripple so that it continues to build and build and build, because no one person can do it alone. And we understand that, and our folks understand that. And then one other thing that we add to the process is making sure that we incorporate language justice. So as you mentioned, our base is Black, Brown, and immigrant. So we do all of our meetings and activities so that people can engage in their first language. So right now we're able to manage English and Spanish. So we'll have interpreters during our Zoom calls who are able to speak in Spanish or English to make sure that people who are speaking speak in their first language. But everyone gets to engage in real time. And when we have in-person meetings, we have the devices and interpreters so that people can have the device on their ear and still listen in real time. This is important because 1, we want people to speak in their first language. 2, we want people to know that that we have a sense of belonging for all. We want people to know that this space is for them. And we get to also see that we're living the same lives in different languages. And folks are making connections. One of our bilingual speakers, actually, let me say this, he mostly only spoke Spanish the first while. I don't even know how long, I'm just saying while, that he was engaged with us. And then he started speaking English. He speaks pretty good English as well. And on one of our calls that we had, we were doing our Like, Wish, Wonder, and he said that Spaces in Action is a space to him that creates a community where he knows and feels that he belongs, and how much he appreciates the space, the vibe, and the culture that we've created in the organization that really wants people to show up as they are and move forward and build together. So to me, that was a really powerful statement. And his name is Franklin. It was a really powerful statement that Franklin shared with us.
That's a great story. And actually, so going back as well to the deep listening dimension, which, is a lot of what we were talking about when we met last year. How do you think that, why is it actually in our day-to-day lives? So you obviously in Spaces in Action create these opportunities and spaces, but how do we get better, particularly in our communities, in our day-to-day lives, in our, with our friends, families, with others that we don't always necessarily agree with, because, in society, we're regularly coming up against people with differing points of view, perspectives. How do we get better, do you think, at sort of bringing those skills that you're putting into your work in Spaces in Action into everyday life?
Practice. Because it will never be perfect. I think we need to practice. We need to practice listening for understanding. It's not about listening for agreement. Listening for understanding and beginning to respect our differences and finding the similarities. And let's build on the similarities first and then talk about the differences. Because not one person that I know lives a one-issue life. People live a multi-issue life, right? And there's intersectionality across these issues, because a person who is pregnant is going to need childcare, and they're going to need healthcare, and they're going to need housing, and they're going to need a network and a community of people to be the backbone and support for them. So all of these different pieces are intersected, and there's different challenges that people face. There's challenges that a Black person, a Black woman would face. There's challenges that a Latina woman or a Latino would face. There's challenges that people would face because of disabilities, because of their sexual orientation. How do we create a space that just lets people belong and get to know each other before we add all of those labels? Who are you? What makes you tick? What makes you happy? What brings you joy? What challenges you? How do you overcome those challenges? How do you deal with anxiety? And we may find that there's things that we do similarly, but we also may find that there's things that you can learn from me, and there's things that I can learn from you. And it all starts with sharing our story.
What's one project you've dreamed of but haven't started yet?
One project. I will put this one organizationally. I want to create a project that allows community members to do action research. We do a lot of research, and we work with institutions and some of our national partners, and we'll help develop the questions, and then somebody analyzes and write the report, and they bring it back, and then we use that report locally to support our work. What I want to do is build up the muscle, the knowledge, the confidence of our members so that we are doing our own action research, developing the hypothesis, creating the questions, analyzing the data, writing the report, and then promoting that report. We create all types of tools that we develop in the community with the community. So we've done infographics, we've done moving graphics, we've done short videos to depict how a program runs. But this action research could be something that goes deeper. And I believe, this is my own hypothesis, is that once the community learns this skill, not only will it help Spaces in Action do our work, but it will help them individually increase their earning power. Because when these institutions come in and say, hey, we want to do this research project, we'll say, we have a team of leaders who are ready to help you. What's the budget so that they can get paid to do this work? And they could put it on their resume. Because if you write something on your resume, you need to be able to describe how it is, right? You need to be able to say, this is how I did the work. This is the role I played. So they'll be able to do from A to Z the whole process. I believe this will help them even create new opportunities for themselves in the world that they live in the world they want to change. And we also have a community builder program. So if they come through our community builder program, we've hired some of our community builders as full-time staff. And the folks who wind up not staying with us move on to other places, but they still have a skill set they could take with them. Because what you learn, no one can take from you.
And I think that's a great way to end, LaDon. Thank you so much for talking. It's always great talking to you. And wishing you lots of luck with in the coming months and year ahead with all your plans for Spaces in Action. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Each episode of Capita in Conversation is produced by Michael Bettis and is available by podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as capita.org.